Good, so welcome everyone, and welcome everyone online, those of you tuning in live, and those of you, it's really weird when you do this, it's weird, and then you talk to this plastic thing on the wall there, but there are people on the other side of that plastic thing on the wall. Anyway, so welcome to all the people on the other side of the plastic thing on the wall. Welcome everybody, particularly welcome if you're just starting the challenge this last 3 weeks. So sit comfortably, don't sit on your knees for just now, because I'm going to talk for a little bit and then you'll need to save your knees for the meditation. We should have a sign over the shrine saying, save your knees to the meditation. As soon as the lights are up, you have your knees up, lights down, knees down. Yeah. That's the kind of knees code. Trust us, we've been doing it a long time. Okay, so yeah, my name is Maitreya Bandhu, if you've not met me before. Who's been on the challenge so far? Let's have our hands up for who's on the challenge. Okay, that's great. So not everybody on the challenge. Come in, yes, that's fine. That's fine, yeah, come in. Oh, some more, okay. So if you're not on the challenge, you can still register, can't they? So, and that means that you can then, because we're doing led meditations every morning on Zoom, so it can really support your meditation. So if you've not joined the challenge, it's free to register, and then they'll send you a Zoom link. And what time are you meditating in the morning?
7:30 to 8:30.
Yeah, there you go. You can meditate at 7:30 with one of the teachers here. Karsh Mitra's doing it this week, isn't he? He's a very, very good teacher. So if you've not registered for the challenge, I'd really recommend that you still do that. This is week 3 of it. Yes, and this is the penultimate week of the challenge. So some of you have done it right from the beginning and been doing morning meditations and doing these evening classes. So I thought it would be worth right from the start just sort of suggesting a next step, which is that Garavavati and I are going to be leading a Life with Full Attention course, which is a mindfulness course. There's been a lot said about mindfulness in recent years, but it's it's a sort of an 8-week, pretty intensive exploration of what mindfulness is from a Buddhist point of view. Not that you have to be a Buddhist to do the course, it just means here's what Buddhism says that mindfulness is, and explores mindfulness. I'll say more about that in the tea break, but I wanted to announce it here as well for the people online, because it's also going to be an in-person course, and it's our first time of trying to do a hybrid course where you can book online or you can book in person, and that'll be 8 weeks. So that's a little ad. So all I want to do this first half is kind of recap a little bit about where we've been, and then say another step. A few more coming in. Hi there, come in. Okay. Is there a place that you can find? There's lots of places, I think, still. Yeah. So I started off, I think it was me, a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, saying that Buddhist meditation is primarily about creating, discovering, uncovering a new mind. Hi there, come in. It's about creating, discovering, uncovering a new mind. At least that's one way of putting it. And that new mind is embodied by the figure of the Buddha on the shrine. Yeah? The Buddha's consciousness is a wholly new consciousness, a wholly new mind, a wholly new way of being in the world. Even when we call it a mind, it's sort of slightly as if it's just to do with how he thinks or something. It's that the Buddha is like a whole new species, at least that's one way of thinking about him. He was born an ordinary human being and became a Buddha. A Buddha is a title, and it means literally awake, yeah? Which of course is suggesting that we're asleep, or at least nodding off. But yeah, so what Buddhism is saying to us, what the Buddha is saying to us all the time, is that there's a potential in your consciousness to wake up. Yeah? And the Buddha literally means he is awake. It just means awake, exclamation mark. Yeah? So the Buddha's contribution to your life, if you want that contribution, is that you have a mind. That mind, as I've been emphasizing, is the most remarkable thing in the universe. We don't know because we've not gone everywhere. But we think that the human mind, as far as we know anyway, the human mind is the most remarkable thing in the universe. We still don't know how it's there. We still don't know how this can happen. how we can perceive and move around like we do. We can see where nerves fire and all that sort of thing. But there's no idea about how the mind produces this that we're just experiencing now. Yeah? In philosophy, it's called the hard problem. Nobody knows how mind creates this experience that we've got. So we don't know what it is. What we also don't know, we don't know what its capacities are. We're now doing things, unbelievable, a huge amount of things that would never have been dreamed possible. I believe we've sent a spacecraft out to our solar system, but I got that wrong last time. But we're doing pretty amazing things. Even travelling under the ground is pretty amazing when you think about it. Going through underneath the channel. We're doing things that even not very long ago would be thought to be miraculous. I'm old enough to remember Tomorrow's World. Does anyone remember Tomorrow's World? And I remember them talking about one day you'd be able to have a mobile phone. And there was a man walking around a field with a phone in a case and said one day you'll be able to phone from the middle of a field. And we go, it'll never happen. Meanwhile, I've got my phone in my pocket. I remember that thinking, well, that just seems incredible. So we've not got to the end of it, even that horizontal growth of the mind. We don't know what the mind can do. We're still breaking sports records. We're doing all sorts of things that are amazing. Yeah. So we don't know. We've got this incredible thing called a mind. We don't really know what it is. We don't know what it's capable of. Buddhism would say it's capable of awakening, and that's the most important thing of it. That it's awakening to a new kind of consciousness. Yeah. That new kind of consciousness is usually described in three ways as being the perfection of wisdom, the perfection of love or compassion, and the perfection of energy. It's interesting, often people leave energy out. So it's the Buddha is a bit like what human beings would be like if they could fully express themselves at every level. What you'd end up with is this perfection of wisdom, this great compassion, how it's experienced by others, great compassion, and there's a complete unleashing of all of your energy. Yeah. So often religions and spiritual groups and so on are associated with dampening your energy. But what you get in the Buddha is an image of all of your energy being completely free. Yeah. Sometimes that's imagined as a red, naked female figure dancing in space. That your energy is like that, yeah, completely free to move in all directions. So when you're coming to a Buddhist center and learning meditation, even if it's just the tiniest baby step, it's always a step from your consciousness that you've got now, the mind you've got now, a little tiny bit towards the mind of a Buddha or a mind of awakening. Yeah? In other words, towards wisdom, towards compassion, and towards enlightened energy. The only problem is that we don't know what wisdom is and we don't know what compassion is. We don't know what enlightened energy is, but still. Anyway. Mustn't grumble. So what we've been exploring in these little series of teachings is what's sometimes translated as the object determining mental events, which always sounds so technical. But it's always better to imagine what would it be like to meet the Buddha. He'd say, well, I don't seek to have that kind of mind. I just think about rubbish, worry about this, plan that, fantasize about that, argue with this person in my mind. That doesn't seem to be the most remarkable thing in the universe to me. So he'd say something like, well, that's because you don't stay with your experience for long enough. Yeah? He wouldn't say anything spooky or mystical. He'd just say, all you need to do is stay with your experience for long enough, and then your mind, your whole experience will deepen. And as I said, we don't know how deep it can go. Yeah. So he'd say, well, first of all, you need to get interested in your experience. So the first week we were talking about chanda, which is translated as interest or eagerness or fascination. Yeah. In other words, you need to be interested in your mind and interested in the possibilities as much more to you than you think. If you're not, you're probably best not coming here. I mean that in all friendship. Go and see Spider-Man, which I still haven't seen. But the Buddha would say, okay, the first thing you need to be is actually interested in in mind, interested in your experience, and open to the possibility that that experience can go vastly deeper. Yeah. In fact, you need to have a sort of eagerness for that, a desire for that. It's interesting. It's nothing like how we tend to teach meditation in the West, which is, do you want to relax or de-stress? And you never hear any kind of language of that in Buddhist sutras. What you hear is, okay, the first thing you need to do is cultivate interest in your experience. Yeah. So this is a life lesson as well, isn't it? We need to be interested. If we don't get interested, we don't go deeper. Yeah? You know what it's like if you're scrolling through your Instagram or whatever. You don't go deeper unless you get interested in something and go into that. Yeah? I'm just creating this with Nick at the back there. I'm creating a Nature of Mind project, which is an international project that explores the mind. I'll say a little bit about it later. But, it's nothing compared to trying to teach a 15-year-old girl to do their homework, which is what I was doing on Saturday night. It's really interesting having a teenage girl who's not interested in art, trying to get her to do her art homework. I can tell you, I could have a career in international politics after that. Everything is so difficult because she's not interested. And you can't make yourself interested in something. You have to somehow cultivate interest. You have to find where your interest is going and find more and more intelligent and creative ways of finding your interest and taking it in a direction that's in your interests. Yeah? That's actually going to go somewhere that's going to help your life flourish, rather than get interested in things that are going to help your life, not flourish, the opposite of flourish. Yeah? So one of the things we often find is we can't get interested in anything. We can't get interested. If you can't get interested, you can't go deeper. Yeah, you can't stay with your experience. So that's where we started. And then, as you cultivate interest, you can start to stay with experience, can't you? You know what it's like. It's on a very simple level. When you're reading a novel, it's like that. You start reading a novel, and you don't feel very. You sort of look at it and think, how long is it? And you read the first paragraph, and then you sort of think, they feel like quite an effort now, don't they, reading a novel? They didn't used to, but it's much easier to watch some rubbish on YouTube. But at first you can feel yourself trying to get interested. And then there's a point, isn't there, if it's a good novel, that you are intrinsically interested. You're not trying to get interested anymore. And you immediately go deeper into the novel. And what I've noticed when I've been reading novels a lot more recently, but what I've noticed is that once that's happened, as soon as I open the novel again the next night before I go to bed, I get into it much quicker. Have you noticed that? You're just into it. You just open it again, and you don't need to go through that process of, do I care about these characters? You're just right into it. You've already established interest. And just see how that applies to meditation. As you cultivate interest in going deeper in meditation, the next time you meditate, your interest is already peaked a bit. So it's like opening the novel again, and you can get back into it, yeah. And that process can deepen and deepen, yeah. So that stage is called in Buddhism is called Adi Moksha, which means literally intensified interest that stays with its object, which is a very technical way of saying you're just into it now. You're not trying to be into it; you're just into it, yeah. So you could translate that as commitment, and that's how we talked about it last week. That you're then committed to things. But the next thing that happens is, even when you commit to something, and you must have had this experience by now, even if you're in the midst of a really good novel, in a really good conversation, in a really in the depth of a really good meditation, you can suddenly lose it again. I've had this many times in meditation where my meditation is actually going deeper. I'm intrinsically interested, so I'm going deeper, and then suddenly I'm just thinking about rubbish, completely gone. So it's not like you get a little bit distracted and more distracted, then you're very distracted. You can go from being really intrinsically interested, really emotionally wanting to do this, to thinking about rubbish, to thinking about an argument, to remembering something, and then you can get frustrated with yourself if you're not careful, and that pushes the meditation away from you even more. Yeah. So that's something you need to learn, that even when you've got to that point where you're intrinsically into something, when you're into the meditation, you can still just go like that, yeah? Your mind will go sometimes. Sometimes it seems to me that, particularly when it goes deeper, It's as if there's a kind of, you want it until you start to get a taste of it, and you think, I'd rather think about, what I'm going to cook this evening, or, it's like it slightly threatens you, not because it's bad or difficult, but precisely because it's not. It's like suddenly a little bit unfamiliar, and it's like your mind has this kind of bounce to something that you're more habituated to. Yeah? So do you see, that's another stage. You've got getting interested in something, you've got getting really into it to the point of commitment, purified, intensified interest that stays with this object. It's a very technical way of saying that, but you see what he's getting at. So then you're right into it, and then suddenly you're off again. Now if you react to that and think, I can't believe it, I was just really into it a minute ago and now I'm off, then what will happen is you'll push the meditation away from you. And then you'll think, oh no, I'm pushing the meditation away from me, I shouldn't be doing that. And then you'll push it further away from you. Yeah? So what you need to do then is just remember that that's another stage. And that's called shmiti, which is often translated as mindfulness itself. But it really, the word shmiti really means, it's from the root remembering. So all you need to do is, oh no, but I don't want to do that. You just need to remember, no, I wanted to do that. I wanted to be into that. You've probably even done it I've done it with novels, where I got into a novel, suddenly I'm texting somebody on WhatsApp. You just sort of ping out of it. And you just need to remember, no, I did say that I wasn't going to do the WhatsApp thing, I was actually going to read this novel like a grown-up human being, like they used to do in the 19th century, sit there with a pipe reading a novel. That's what my father used to do. So you just remember, okay, that's what happens. As I go a bit deeper, I'll tend to want to ping off as well, either in life or in meditation. So all I need to do is just remember, no, I was wanting to do this valuable thing. You don't need to push it, you don't need to make a big deal of it. You just sort of remind yourself. If you've ever gone to a concert that you're really into, when you get really into the music, you still find yourself, your mind goes off. And all you need to do is really carefully say, no, I am interested in the music. It's not as conscious as that, but there's like another instinct that's saying, no, I want to pay attention, I'm enjoying this. Yeah? And you see that word enjoying is very key, because the way you'll get interested is if you take enjoyment in what you're doing. Yeah? That's why pleasure in meditation is so important. Yeah? But perhaps we might say something about that next week or later on. Yeah, so that's what we've been exploring. We're trying to move towards a new kind of mind, a mind that is woken up, not a mind like our mind that has bad dreams and is falling asleep. And the Buddha would say, okay, the first thing you need to do is learn to stay with your experience long enough so your experience deepens. Yeah? And you do that by cultivating interest, by letting that intensify into a kind of commitment, or at least that's one way of putting it, to keep coming back to your commitment, and that's how you go deeper. And that's how you go deeper if you're painting a picture, that's how you go deeper in a conversation with a friend, that's how you go deeper if you're looking at a landscape, that's how you go deeper in meditation. Anything that's got value, that you want to get close to, that you want to go into, has got those stages. You need to get interested, that interest needs to get to a point where you're just into something, and then you go even further than that, you keep bringing yourself back to that something that you're into. Yeah? And then you'll move into samadhi proper, which Garavavati will talk about in the second half. Yeah. Okay, so let's have a go at doing that. Okay, so we've got a minute or two just to hear how you got on with that. So that's good to hear from a few of you how you get on with that. Do you get what I'm saying? How did it help you in the meditation? Did it help you? Yeah.
Pain in the spine, like between my shoulder blades, was the big hindrance for me. And my mind kept on going to the Islamic prayer of like, is that something between this meditation and yoga? So we don't have to sit still all the time, and we have both the spiritual side and the physical movement side. Could I modify this? That was just
that
kept on distracting me.
Yeah, so the thing I'll draw out from that is physical pain. I do think that quite often when you actually sit still, you actually, well, clearly one of the first things is you notice your body, don't you? When I first meditated here, on the Wednesday night class, 30 years ago, whatever it was, a bit more than that, I'd never sat still with my eyes closed and done nothing. I always have a television, there was always something going on. So do you see, as soon as you close your eyes, you become more aware of what else is going on in your experience. Most of our experience is kind of cerebral, isn't it? Most of our experience is a kind of YouTube channel that's going on in our mind all the time, sometimes happily burbling, sometimes nightmarishly critical. So as soon as you meditate, especially if someone guides you into the body, you notice your body. Very often you notice that the body is uncomfortable. It's quite unusual, I think, to be really comfortable, unless, I find it quite unusual to be really comfortable. So the important thing to say is, as soon as you feel aversive to that, even as soon as you start to ask those questions, you're asking those questions because you feel that you don't like it, because you feel aversive, and that starts to push you away from the meditation. And even you start thinking, it's distracting me, which is, so on. So it's easy to say, of course, but you're trying to treat discomfort as if it was comfort. You actually try and turn your mind towards it and feel it more, and relax around it. As soon as you get into that, I don't like this, you're basically tensing around it and making it worse. The other thing you can do is extend your awareness to include your whole body. So that discomfort is there, but there are other parts of your body as well. Yeah. So one of the things you're trying to do in meditation is face up to your physical discomfort and find more creative ways of relating to it. And one of the key uncreative way, and natural way, but usually makes things worse, is to feel aversive. And that tightens you around the pain and makes the pain worse. Yeah, the guy in the stripe at the back, and then I'll come to you.
I don't probably meditate enough to know what it feels like to be meditating well. But the first half, I find myself in a very interesting space, probably deeper than I'd experienced. That's not saying much, but there's definitely I've been through before. I think the second half, my mind got preoccupied with wondering, why is it this interesting? Why am I not fascinated?
Right,
There's very little going on.
Yes, that's right.
So I didn't find my breath particularly interesting. I think
No.
again, the occasional steer towards a slightly wider viewpoint. I think then things became more interesting.
Yes, yeah.
At least for me.
No, I think that's very, very interesting. Sometimes you can just go quite into a deeper meditation, and it feels intrinsic, doesn't it? And then you think, how come I'm not in there now? And as you say, people used to say to me, be interested in the breath. It's just not interesting. Try Spider-Man, okay, but the breath, you think, so you're not trying to pretend you're interested in something that you're not. So this whole question of finding interesting is quite subtle, because if you're not careful, you then get into that, why am I not interested? I should be interested. It would be better to, but we always know that. Most teaching is telling you things that you already know. It's just, how do I do it? So how do you do it? So there you are, you're not very interested. So at the very least, you can get interested in the fact you're not very interested. You can think, gosh, what does that feel like not to be very interested? I can't, in a way, teach it. It's weird, you can't really teach it. So you have to find a way. There must be a way, because your mind is endlessly deep. But yes, don't sort of pretend that the breath is interesting, because it very often isn't. But your mind must be. So by definition, there's always a way. It's just you have to be a bit creative in the meditation, not in a game playing way, but in a creative kind of exploratory way, trying things out. Okay, so I was deeper and again. Well, what you could do, what you might have done, is say, well, what was that like again? Feeling deeper in the meditation, and sometimes that brings it back. Yeah, there's so many ways, but be careful of getting into that. Oh, how do I do the interest thing? It's not. That's extrinsic. You're trying to do something intrinsic. We tend to kind of bounce out of our experience and think, oh, I should be doing that thing I've just been taught, and I can't do it. So let's just try and find out how you do it. How you do it tonight. You particularly, you with your mind tonight on this evening. How do you do it? But it's a much more subtle art than it sounds. Somebody else, you were asking a question.
I mean, you kind of touched on it there. There was a moment when you were guiding us where you said something like explore, or maybe it was to do with trying to find interest, maybe it was to do with trying to go deeper. In my mind, it's sort of those two things have merged.
Yeah.
And I found myself definitely, as I sank into like more of a whole body awareness, and we brought in noise, and then I found myself feeling like I was getting closer to it.
Yes.
Then. But I suppose before you'd spoken, I was interested in what you meant by explore and try things out.
Right. Yeah.
Because there were little bits of like words that felt interesting that were going around in my mind. Then
right.
I was sort of interested in the texture of my experience right now as compared to it was earlier on in the day, and trying to sort of see the difference between those two things, like what stood out. And I felt like some of those things really did take me further away.
Yes, that's right.
And it was the pausing at the sort of full body awareness this time, I think, which brought me closer, just not having to think any further than that.
Yes,
but it's hard to see a way forward past that.
From that, that's right. That's a good way of putting it. I mean, it's interesting. I often notice when I lead meditation that when I say listen, the whole atmosphere goes deeper. When I say watch the breath, everyone's like, I know, I should. Oh yes, one. Oh God, this is so like Buddhist-y or meditate. Like you can feel that like nobody's getting anywhere. But as soon as I say just listen to the traffic, everyone. Ooh. The whole, don't you? You feel it, don't you? The whole atmosphere goes deeper. So one of the things that's saying is that, I like what I was doing actually mainly in that meditation was, doing that, because I slept very badly last night, so I'm very tired. When you get tired, your mind kind of, you know what it's like. Your mind kind of collapses in on itself and sort of goes down, doesn't it? And then that becomes a physical thing. So actually, if you're tired, one of the things you do is you keep on stretching your mind out, and it stops that happening. It can become quite pleasant. So one of the ways of getting interested, so let me just see if I can just stretch my mind out. But what you're watching for is that becoming a bit fanciful. Like you said, I got interesting thoughts going on. Because the other thing that can happen is you think, and here's a line of a poem that I think is going to be my great work. That's what happens to me. That's what's and then I write it down later and it's just rubbish. It was just a distraction. So even that idea that, I'm trying to get interested, can be like a fantasy interest. You can think you have these great ideas and afterwards you can't remember them, or they're just not great ideas. So you're trying to look for this intrinsic interest in my experience now. Even that weirdly can be sentimentalized actually. But yeah, one thing you might try is, I'm going to watch the breath, but I'm going to come at it from this much, much broader sense of my whole body. I've been using that a lot myself and finding it very useful. And then you might think, I'm feeling this whole body. Let's just think of and this is light thought, it's not a great big heavy thought, but let's just think of the breath kind of coming into the body and kind of soothing it all down and quietening it, or just that thought. You might just catch a bit of interest in that. It's like, interest is more, it's funny because even the word interest is an abstraction. So we torture ourselves with abstractions. Interest, I should be interested, and then what's that from? Interest is more like a breeze that's blowing through you and trying to catch the wind of it that takes you into meditation, not out of it. Yeah? So you might, if you did that, stretching my mind out, then, and then the breath is like calming me right down. Sometimes that catches your interest enough to then get into it. It's like tacking in a boat. Not that I've ever done such a thing. You're trying to, but you do something with the sails. You try and use the wind. You see how nautical I am. You're using the wind to go the direction you're trying to go. That's what interest like. Otherwise, the wind will just blow you out of the meditation. So you can't just tell the wind, please don't blow me out of the meditation. You have to use it to blow you back into it. Now that's a job for you to do every time you sit down to meditate. Okay, let's have a cup of tea.
Okay, so in the second half, I wanted to talk about this sort of next stage, this next Well, I call them the intensifiers. What do you call them? What does Sangha call them? The mind determining, object determining.
Yeah, stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, as Mike Bandhu was saying in the first half, in a way, these different stages or ways of approaching meditation or looking at our minds, they're a bit like a map, basically. They're a map to help us to go deeper into our experience. So we are specifically talking about them in relation to meditation, but as Mike Bandhu was saying in the first half, they apply to the whole of our lives, and that's probably why you've all come to the Buddhist Centre, because you've had this sense that there is more to your life, and that meditation or Buddhism might have something to say about that, might be able to uncover something about that. And it was lovely, the sort of, the vision in a way of Buddhism that Mike Bandhu was drawing out, that we can uncover this new kind of mind and that it is available to us. So when we can get interested in our experience, and when we can intensify and sustain that interest and generate a sense of commitment and a sense of resolve, and when we can remember and sort of recollect that intention, as Mike Bandhu was saying in the first half, when all of those things are in place, what happens naturally is absorption. So that's the sort of next great stage in this sort of system of meditation. So I'm going to talk a bit about absorption, and it was interesting because Mike Bandhu and I we talked about this before Christmas, didn't we, what we were going to do? And then I was looking at it just before the weekend of, oh yes, I'm going to be talking about absorption. And I quite often have this when I'm teaching. I'm like, absorption, I don't know what absorption is. I don't experience absorption. And they're like, oh my no, how am I going to talk about it? And you might have a similar experience. I remember I was like, oh yeah, this has characterised actually a lot of my sort of Buddhist career from before I was ordained, before I was trying to teach Buddhism and meditation. From when I first came along, I could really identify when people would talk about mental proliferation, prapancha, and the hindrances and things that would obstruct meditation and restlessness and all the things that would get in the way. And when the teachers started talking about more refined mental states and like dhyanic experiences where everything starts to unify and you start to have a really positive experience and you don't need to make any effort anymore and it's just really relaxed, and I just would switch off because I was like, oh yeah, well, that's not for me. Like, I'm the person that's working with the sloth and the tiredness and the restlessness. So I'd switch off when they start talking about that. So it's quite interesting that even now I can be like, oh, I don't know what absorption is, but actually I do know what absorption is, and you know what absorption is as well. And it's really important to... It's really important to realise that actually, that in a way that the figure of the Buddha is our potential. I think it takes a really long time to really try to direct ourselves towards that potential, that is a potential for us. And as Mike Bandhu was saying in the first half, that is a vision, or that potential that the Buddha represents is this perfected wisdom, perfected kindness, perfected energy. Something which is unbound, free, luminous, completely unified, like all of our energies moving in the same direction. So we're not scattered, we're not dithering around, we're not unsure. We're really just present with our experience, wholehearted, whole actually. And I think it can take a long time to realise that as a potential for ourselves, but it really helps to even just play with the fact that it might be possible, or try out the fact that it might be possible, because it does really have an effect in meditation and in our lives. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just say a little bit about what absorption is and my experience of absorption, and then maybe some examples of how you might cultivate absorption. Because the thing with absorption, it's not a problem, it's wonderful, but yeah, the thing with absorption is you can't sort of make it happen. Like, you can't just sit and decide, now I shall get absorbed. Ding! Absorption. So we can use the intensifiers, the things that we've just been talking about, in order to develop absorption, and we can use them as a map. We can sort of work our way back down through them, see if they're present, and if they're not, we can activate them. Or we can go right back to the start and see, okay, am I interested? And we work our way up through the intensifiers to see, if absorption will arise. And a bit like what we were saying, absorption will naturally arise. We might suddenly get interested in our experience, and then really frustratingly, we're suddenly thinking about what we've got to do tomorrow, even though a moment of absorption has arisen, and then we're distracted, and it can be really confusing in meditation. So you can be like, oh, but I was really getting somewhere, I was really enjoying this. And it's interesting what Maitreya was saying about this sort of it's not familiar to us, those really expansive mental states which are free of wanting or not wanting, can be quite unfamiliar to us and almost quite not even threatening. They're not really consciously threatening, it's just that we don't know them, they're not familiar, and so we sort of habitually go to what's familiar. And it reminded me of when I was on my 3-month ordination retreat, so in the Spanish mountains, doing a lot of meditation, mainly in silence, and it must have been about halfway through, and I was having meditation reviews with the women who ordained me, Garavavati. And I remember going into this little cabin. It was lovely. It was like this open-walled cabin that looked out onto the mountains. And I went up there, and I'd been thinking about what I was going to say, because there's not, much else to do. So it was like, what will I say in my meditation review? And actually, what I said to her was, I'm really anxious. I'm really worried. And she was like, oh, what's wrong? What's going on? I was like, well, I've just never been in such positive mental states for so long, so consistently. I'm really afraid. And she was like, she's so good, she's like, what are you afraid of? And I was like, I don't know. I was like really anxious that I was in such a positive state. And it's hard to say, when she asked me what I was worried about, I think I probably said, I'm really worried about losing this sense of, losing these positive states. I'm really worried about the retreat ending and what that's going to mean. So I kind of found things that I could be worried about, but really I think I was touching into this new ground of like, I've never known myself so free of anxiety, and so then I got anxious about that. It's quite tragic, isn't it, really? Yes. I didn't realise that at the time. Until Maitreya was just saying it the first half, I was like, oh, that's what was going on. Yes. So I guess I was telling you that story because I think what was happening was more and more of my whole life actually was leading towards becoming absorbed, not just in meditation, but in everything. You will have had this experience when you're on retreat, that because life is so simple and the whole purpose of being there is to try and live from the deepest part of ourselves, the mind naturally becomes absorbed really easily in things, and you're sort of in this state of absorption a lot of the time. And then when you sit to meditate, then it really starts to deepen, and my experience of that is actually characterised by a feeling of relief. And in particular meditation, I can have this feeling of like, you're concentrated, I'm concentrated, I'm really paying attention, but I'm also not having to try and make the effort. You know how we're talking about, am I interested, am I not interested, where's my emotions going, can I make this more, can I pay more attention, can I remember? All of that in a way just sort of dissolves, and there's just me. There's not even just me actually, I'm sort of not there. It's me and the breath, but me and the breath aren't so separate. It's not me focusing on the breath, it's I'm arising, the breath is arising. There's this sense of wholeness, of unification. And pleasure, actually, it's deeply, deeply pleasurable. Even if there's still physical discomfort in the body, somehow this deep sense of relaxation, but deep engagement, creates this feeling of relief, wholeness, a sense of clarity, but not trying to sort of concentrate. Yeah, I remember once when I was meditating in the garden, I live in a community just down the road. It's quite noisy in our garden. And I was meditating in the garden, there's lots of noise. And at the start of the meditation, I was trying to do the mindfulness of breathing, trying to focus on the breath. And there was just loads and loads of noise. So I was like, oh, this is getting in the way of me getting absorbed. The noise, it's classic, isn't it? Like, I can't get absorbed because of the noise, or I can't get absorbed because of the pain in my body. So it's the noise that was I felt like was sort of blocking the concentration. But when I just started to listen to the sounds and get interested in the sounds, and also even just start to notice my own aversion to the sounds, then I became interested in the experience. And it's not that I was necessarily like trying to get interested, I just became interested. And then it became a bit pleasurable, and then I sort of had this recollection of like, oh yes, this is what I do want to be present with the breath. This does feel intrinsically meaningful. So then staying with the breath, and then just this lovely deep feeling of, like I said, a feeling of relief, but also that comes with a feeling of like, oh yeah, this is what life is about. Like in that moment, I felt like I could just sit in the garden forever, and my breath would unfold, the sounds would unfold, life would just keep unfolding beautifully, unfolding. I didn't need to do anything, but I could just sit there, and sort of life. It sounds a bit cheesy now, but it's like, oh yeah, life would just live through me, and it would keep unfolding, and it would be beautiful, and whatever happened, it didn't really matter somehow. There's this delightful feeling of like, this is so meaningful, and whatever's happening, it doesn't matter. And it was lovely, and in that meditation, I had that sort of like more sort of experiential sense of like, oh, I could sit here forever. And then probably after 5 minutes, I stopped and I got up and I carried on with my life. And it's like that. That's what absorption's like. It's like a new vista of possibility opens up, and there's a vision. I had a vision of myself, like, wow, this is, if I could live from this place, life would be wonderful. And it really wouldn't matter what happened. It wouldn't matter. I wouldn't be shaken. Like a deep felt sense of that. And then I don't know what happened. I can't even tell you what happened, but suddenly I probably just started thinking about something else. Then I was like, I think it's time to end this meditation. And then it's just like a sort of, well, I say it's not actually just a memory, because actually if I recall that moment, I can get in touch with the spirit of it. But it didn't, that wasn't like, that's not like my life forever now. I don't just walk down the street and be like, oh, sirens, loads of dog mess on the street, it doesn't matter. I'm like, but I get into an aversive state of mind, yeah. But it's really good to know that state of mind is possible. And it is also good to have a map of how to get there. It's also really good to know that usually the way to get there, I think, I don't know who it was, but someone was talking about it, how when they just sat down to meditate in the first half, they did feel quite concentrated straight away, maybe a bit absorbed straight away. That's wonderful, and that can happen on retreat, but often in the midst of our daily life and our routine and our daily meditation practice in the city in our life, that's not usually our experience, that we sit and we enter into absorption. But it is a possibility, and it's really important when we are meditating, and actually when we're in our everyday life, to recall that as a possibility and to know that that's a possibility. So in a way, I feel like that's all I want to tell you tonight, is like, this is what absorption feels like. You will have had experience of it, either in meditation or outside of meditation, where there's a moment, sometimes it's like a moment of beauty, and you sort of forget yourself, but you feel deeply in touch with yourself. That's like a moment of absorption. You have a vision for yourself, but it's also a vision for how you could live your life. It's deeply meaningful, and it feels like nothing, and sort of in a sort of ego death way, nothing matters, a sense of what so hard to talk about this and say I don't matter, but it all sounds a bit cliche, but because you do matter, but just not in the way you think you do, so contracted and self-concerned and neurotic, So I want to sort of illuminate the possibility of absorption, and the word for that is samadhi in this context, which is a beautiful word, and one of the translations of it is concentration, but also energized calm. And that is kind of like what it's like. It's like, all your energies are moving in one direction, and there's this deep sense of calm, but not in a kind of like, oh, I'm so relaxed and calm kind of way, but in a really, a really physically your senses are calmed, but you're sort of, your faculties are engaged and alert, and there's a sort of sensitivity, a bit like Maitraban was talking about sailing. When you're sailing, I did a lot of sailing. I grew up on the Isle of Wight, so I was put in a boat when I was 5, so I've done a lot of sailing. I'm doing this because you don't do that with the sail. Well, you do a bit. You kind of pull it in. But often, actually, what you're feeling is with the direction of the boat, which is more with your... you are feeling it, and you feel it. It's a really physical sensation, because you're like, if the wind, oh, maybe I don't need to give you a sailing lesson, but basically you're trying to get as close to the wind as you can, because that's when you really catch the wind and you just fly and you go really fast. But if you turn the boat directly into the wind, you stop. So you're trying to feel the wind so that you catch the wind and you get close to the wind. So you have to feel it. You can't just think the wind is coming in that direction, because actually what happens with the wind, it's really annoying, it's changing all the time. So you can't just set your course and be like, I'm going to go in this direction. The wind changes, and it's frustrating, but that's just what life's like, isn't it? And in a way, that's what we're like. It's like, we're never, or maybe you will, but for a while you're not going to have the perfect external conditions. Like, when you want, well, maybe you're not like me, but I want like the perfect morning routine, so I can have a really good morning, set myself up for the day and have a really good day. And then what it's like something happens in the evening, you end up staying up late for whatever reason, and then something happens in the morning, or there's a deadline you've got, or something where it like disrupts the routine, and it's like the winds change. So then what can happen is we can get tighter and tighter, like, oh, but I need energized calm, this isn't gonna work, It's like, whoa. Like, this is what I do, like, but you're not gonna get there through trying desperately to hold on to the possibility of an expansive state of mind. So you have to be really like disciplined, but also really holding loose to the fact that all the external conditions are changing, you're changing. So a bit like really what we're saying the first half, like, how are you responding to what's arising in this moment as you are, knowing the way to get to absorption is to engage directly and become interested in the direct experience. Usually that's a bit unpleasant. It's really easy to get interested in pleasure and something like beautiful. That's quite easy. The difficulty is to not get into intoxication and want it to last. But usually when a lot of our experience is like mildly unpleasant, or maybe it's not, but I feel like it kind of is. Maitrabandi's nodding, maybe you've had the same thing. It's like, and then what can be happening when we sit to meditate or just outside of meditation is there's a subtle or not so subtle aversion to the experience. It's like, I don't want it. And then what we can do with that aversion is we can think, oh, I'm going to meditate so that I can you're trying to meditate around the unpleasant experience. Like, oh, I know, I'll be mindful and then this unpleasant experience is going to go away, or I'm feeling like I hate someone or I don't like them, I'm going to do the metta bhavana on them and then I'll feel full of love. Have you tried that before? Doesn't it? And what happens is for me, like, I sit down and I'll be like, right, I'm doing the metta bhavana. And I'm not like, what's actually going on in my experience is I'm in an aversive state of mind. I don't want my experience. And actually, that's what I need to come into relationship with. Like, really wanting love isn't enough. I've got to engage. I can't jump over my experience to get to what I want. That's actually going to push what I want further away. So I've got to really come into relationship with actually my body, like when I was meditating the other morning, I was fantasizing about living in a really beautiful place and not working at the Buddhist Center because I get lots of emails. And I was like, I woke up really tired and I was like, oh, I'm too busy, there's too many people in my life, I need to just be on a desert island somewhere, or not quite that extreme, but. And I sat to meditate, and I was like, okay, because I was going to be talking about samadhi, I was like paying a bit more attention probably than normally do. And I was like, right, what is going on? I'm like, all right, I'm fantasizing about a different life. Okay, that's where my energy's going. I want a different life, fair enough. Like, why am I doing that? What's actually going on? Oh, I'm in pain. I'm in physical pain. I'm tired, my neck hurts, I've got a bit of anxiety because I've got quite a lot to do. I'm not sure how I'm going to fit it all in this week. So like my being is a bit contracted and also a bit fizzy, and I'm really tired and I just want to sleep. But I also feel like I should meditate because like that's going to help me. So it's like, do you see this like horrible congealment of like, there's this thing going on and then I'm trying to do something that's good for me over the top. It's never going to work, is it? Like, that's not going to lead to this state of energized calm and absorption. So what I noticed then in that meditation just the other morning was like actually just noticing like, oh, the first point actually was like, oh, I want a different life. I think that's where my energy's going, and then coming back to the body, like, okay, there's pain here. Oh, what does that? Then I could actually get just noticing that I'm like, oh, I didn't really. I mean, I knew because I woke up feeling tired and achy, and I'm like, I'm just getting old now. This is what the mornings are like. Mornings aren't like that in your 20s unless you're hungover. I'm like, oh, mid-30s is like onwards. Is it just like the mornings are like, oh, they're horrible. Anyway, so where was I going? So yeah, that was my morning, and yeah, so just to notice that, like, oh, this is a bit painful. Actually, that's actually when I started. The meditation actually took off. Was when I was like, oh, that was interest. I was actually interested in what was happening, and then then hopefully because I've been practicing for a while, I was like, what actually did arise was a bit of love, like, oh, like this is a bit painful. You're in pain, It's a natural response to just really acknowledging a bit of pain. And then like, oh, okay. Then I got a bit distracted and I was like, oh, I do believe that if I stay with my experience with a loving awareness, this will bear fruit. This does feel worthwhile. So I kind of cultivated a bit of resolve or a bit of commitment to recall. I guess it's recollection as well, like recalling like, oh no, I do want to be with my experience, because I know that if I just bounce off into fantasizing about something else to go away from the physical pain is not going to work. So I do believe that staying with the experience with this awareness will help. So I sort of did that for a bit. I don't really know if I got to absorption actually, but there's something about that which really laid a foundation for more commitment, more resolve, more attentiveness, which will lay the foundation for absorption. And sometimes we can experience absorption after meditation. So you might just be doing that in meditation, like getting interested, intensifying the interest by sort of like choosing to stay with the object of meditation, recalling why you want to stay, like remembering the importance of that, maybe glimpsing a bit of samadhi, a bit of absorption, but then bouncing out and then coming back again. Okay, distracted, coming back. So your meditation might look a bit like that. You might not reach this state that I was talking about of deep relief, unification, all the energy going in one direction. You might not reach that in the meditation, but sometimes that can come afterwards. That can particularly happen on retreat, or sometimes, like, yes, spiritual life's so mysterious and meditation practice, life's so mysterious, how you can be working away, and then suddenly outside of the meditation practice, something different comes in, and you know it's a fruit of your practice. So we can use these intensifiers as a little bit of a map. So when you sit and you're probably not absorbed, you can say, okay, am I interested in my experience? What am I interested in? Where is my energy going? And you're trying to get interested. You're noticing what you're interested in. Then you're intensifying that interest. You're remembering, recollecting the sort of value of that. I was going to say something else. What was I going to say? Oh, that's weird. My mind's just gone completely blank. Oh yeah, so you're using them as a map, so you can go sort of down them and up them if you're not in absorption. What we can often do when we're not absorbed, we probably have an idea of like what the meditation practice should do for us. trying to think what to say next. Or maybe I can tell you a story actually, because I'm trying to order my thoughts, and maybe telling you a story might help. So, yeah, I live with a really lovely young woman who's studying at university, and she's got loads of essays on, and she got COVID over Christmas and got really behind on her essays. And I had an idea about how to help her, because I'm really fond of her, and I can see she's a bit stressed. I want to help her. So I was like, okay, she's getting behind on her essays. What she needs to do is like do better time management. So one of our classic. So one of the other women that we live with, that's actually her job, is that she tutors like Cambridge students on how to time manage themselves. So she's like really good at her job. Anything that's like to do with Cambridge or Oxford, you're like, wow, you must be really good, right? So I was saying to my friend, like, oh, look, you need to speak to Hannah. Hannah's going to help you, like. And my friend was like, not sure. And I was like, oh, she's a bit resistant. Maybe there's something deeper going on about time management. So I was like, I'm going to meet up with her and have lunch with her and talk to her again, because I really want to, this is the problem, I want to help her. So I talked to her again, and I was like, oh, how's uni going? Like, how's your time management going? And she was like, not so great. Like, I just don't want to write my essays. I'm really demotivated. And I was like, oh, like, maybe you need to speak to Hannah and do the time management thing. and then she was like, maybe. And then I was like, oh, what has helped? And then she was like, well, actually, 2 weeks ago I met up with my tutor, and I had a conversation with him about what he wanted us to do in the essay and how to do it. And then he just gave me loads of confidence, and he said that I could write whatever I'm interested in, and that he was really wanted to hear what I had to say, and he was really interested. And it gave me loads of confidence. And I came home, I wrote the essay, and I handed it in 2 days. And I was like, emotional engagement, interest. So it's really interesting how the way I was approaching her problem, she wasn't, she was doing all the right things. Is I was like, oh, you've got a problem, apply a bit more effort, a bit more strategy, like apply your intellect, this is how, like, do this, do that, make a bit more concerted effort, do everything in time, make a schedule. But what she intuitively was doing actually was making a connection with the professor, getting like an emotional engagement with him, and then becoming interested in the topic, and him giving her the confidence that he was interested in her and that she had something to say. And then as soon as that happened, she could write the essay. And in a way, it's like, I think that's what I'm trying to communicate tonight, is to say that like you can do it, and energized calm is a possibility for you. It's just knowing that that's a possibility, and almost maybe reflecting or recalling times when you have known that as a possibility, when something's opened up in your life where this new kind of mind, this new kind of consciousness, and it's really good. Much about was talking about uncovering it, because in a way it's new, but in another way we know it really deeply. We will have had experiences of that. But it is a bit beyond us as well. Like the Buddha, well, there is a sense of Buddha nature, isn't there? But also, like, in a way, it's unimaginable, unimaginable, and we've got a taste of it. We've got a longing for it, and we will have had a little glimpse of it, a little sense of it, and that's what's brought us to the Buddha Centre. That's what's sort of keeping us going in a way of meditation, because it's not always easy or pleasant, is it? But we've got this sense that there is more, that we can live from a deeper part of ourselves, and it is possible. And in meditation practice, it's really good when you're. So I'm saying to get interested in what's going on, and I'm talking about myself. I was saying about myself getting interested in, my pain and my fantasizing about a different life. That's all good, yeah. So I'm getting interested in the sort of unglamorous, messy part of me that's meditating. But it's also really important, it's good to do that work, but don't spend all your time just doing that, because it's really good to remember that there is another state of mind that's possible, and it is closer to you than you think, and it's in the depths of that experience that you access that state of energized calm, that state of freedom, of unification. So it's really important to recall that as a possibility, to know that as a possibility. Because otherwise it limits meditation. It just becomes about getting interested in what's going on for me, and you can limit it. So it's really important to remember there is something more expansive, and you can do that in the meditation by or looking for that already in your experience, a bit like what we were saying in the first half. If there's pain in the body, take an interest in it, but do that for a while to cultivate the interest, and then once you're a bit interested, once you're with the meditation, then remember to expand out that actually there's a lot more to your experience than the pain. There's a lot more going on within your physical experience, within your heart, your mind, but also sort of cosmically there's a lot more going on that you can keep opening to. So it's really good to get interested in, the sort of, to let the meditation take off. You need to come into relationship with what's happening in the direct experience. And then you need to broaden out to know that there's more, there's another state of consciousness, a deeper state of consciousness, and a more whole, unified state of being. And that's also kind of available to you if you can relax, stay engaged, keep the interest going. Yeah.